Hey, everybody, welcome back to Pro AV today. As somebody who's been in the industry for quite some time, there are very few things left that make me go, wow. But I feel like every single time I step off an attraction at a theme park these days, my mind is blown and I'm left speechless. And whether that's Cosmic Rewind at Disney or something like Transformers at Universal, it's something really that there's been an increase in demand for, right? Technology and innovation in the attractions industry. And one of the guys responsible for quite a bit of that is my next guest here on Pro AV today. We've got Michael Carroll, VP and executive producer over at Dynamic Attractions. Michael, thanks so much for hopping on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Ben. It's a great pleasure, and I'm looking forward to sharing some insights with your audience and also with you.
Michael, when I say the words theme park, it's almost like a trigger phrase for people. They might think of these dingy carnival rides and corn dogs and things like that. But the reality is the attractions and entertainment industry is 5 or 6 generations beyond that, right? Give our listeners just a quick overview. Where is the attractions and entertainment industry today?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting area. Most people in general, when guests go to an attraction, I think they're wowed by the experience, but they don't spend a lot of time thinking about all the different elements that have come together to actually create that experience. And it's amazing the level of complexity that we all now face trying to push further and further into that experience to really wow guests, but to wow them safely and repeatably. And I think as we push forward, the technology that we are pulling in is coming from all kinds of different development areas. We have things that are happening from military. We have things that are happening from industrial. One good example might be for our robot arm ride that we have at Dynamic. That's actually based on a KUKA robotic arm, which is primarily used for building automobiles in the automobile industry. And here we are completely repurposing it for someone's entertainment to make them thrilled and excited.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned KUKA. It's a company I know very, very well. They do so much. You talked about the automotive industry being one of their primary industries, but whether it's the attractions and entertainment industry or robotic bartenders, there's so many fun applications for technology like that today. And kind of speaking of that technology, a lot of times technology is almost pulled out of a traditional use case, right? Where it's now implanted into either a ride or an experience where it's creating this, I'll call it the intersection of physical and digital experiences. But talk a little bit about how you're able to design with that technology in mind, but maybe outside of the traditional use case, KUKA being a good example of that.
Yeah, we are always on the lookout for different cutting edge technologies that can be really stretched or applied to the guest experience. And sometimes we find them in very unlikely places. KUKA is a really good example for that, where you have something that is used primarily for an industrial application that now is being used for entertainment purposes. As developers of attractions and experience, we're always looking to push that boundary. And the only places that we can find things that help us push the boundaries are generally out in research and development laboratories. And a lot of that is happening around military applications or industrial applications. And some of it, things that are coming up now, are really interesting and exciting. You look at what's happening in the space industry, and SpaceX in particular is leading that, but there's a whole huge micro industry that's developing there. And the technologies that they're developing and applying, especially for things like materials research, where they're putting satellites and other objects out in space under incredibly harsh conditions. And as designers and developers, you put something outside here in Florida or California or a lot of the places that we actually develop theme parks for, we have some of the harshest weather conditions. They're beautiful for the guests. It's beautiful, bright sun. Sometimes we have heavy rain, and a lot of times it's near the seaside. So it's very corrosive. All of those elements coming together mean that we have to pay a lot of attention to the materials that are used, along with the other thing that's always interesting is durability, because you find that if guests spend a little bit too much time in line, sometimes they get a little bit fidgety, and things that you thought would be stuck to the wall really well suddenly find a way to come off the wall. So aside from the big improvements that we're always looking for in technologies, we're also looking for those smaller improvements as well to be able to maintain that high quality guest experience that we put out on day one.
Well, you talk about durability there in as a lifetime AVer, I'll be fully transparent. We're not an industry that's always necessarily known for the most reliable technology. As much as we try, right? There's always an excuse, whether it's power. You talk about conditions or long term use, things like that. But the way that you guys use specifically AV technology, things like projectors and speakers, and all sorts of different display devices, they're kind of pulled out of their natural environment, we'll call it. They're in many cases not designed to be on 20, 22, 23, 24 hours a day. How do you work with a manufacturer on that? Is it something that happens a little bit more down the line, or is that something that you guys are collaborating directly with the manufacturer on?
No, oftentimes it happens a little bit later down the line. And I think one maybe good use case example for that, and it may not be one that a lot of the viewers are familiar with yet. In Saudi Arabia, there's a development project going on that's called Qiddiya. And one of my associates is working in that particular project, and he's head of technology and development. So they came up with this idea. One of the focal points of Qiddiya is there's a giant cliff rock face. And somebody said, that thing's like a giant projection screen. We need to do projection mapping on that. So here they are, literally in the middle of the desert with nothing. And the infrastructure for the facilities and everything is just beginning to go in now. So now you're going to put 25 very big, finicky projectors out in the middle of the desert with crazy power conditions. And we want to put something together that's going to be an absolutely spectacular show, and it's going to happen every single night. Wow. Talk about crazy conditions. So in that case, that was the projectors, I believe, were supported by Christie. And Christie worked very closely with them to develop the environmental enclosures that were necessary for the projectors to maintain their life expectancy and also their quality. But it turned out to be an absolutely tremendous project. It's really beautiful. It's gotten a lot of accolades, and it's in the Guinness Book of World Records now as the largest projection mapping that has been done to date.
Man, that is now I feel like I've got to fly and go see that thing, because I am the world's biggest fan, I feel like, of projection mapping. And especially down here in Texas, we get to see it quite a bit on buildings and hills and all kinds of fun stuff. But that sounds like something that I need to check out for sure. And it's a great point that you bring up, right? The guest does not care that you're in the desert and can't run power, or whether maybe even you're in Florida, right? The guest doesn't care whether it's been raining nonstop for 4 days. They expect a show, and they expect everything to be functioning. And let's talk about that guest experience for a minute, because obviously at the end of the day, the guest experience is paramount in attraction design. What are some of the things that you're seeing from a guest perspective, specifically in the attraction space?
I think one of the things that we as designers and developers have been responding to what really the guests have been telling us that they want. And lately, what they've been telling us they want is a very immersive environment. The Star Wars lands at Disney, the Wizarding Worlds at Universal, and the new Star Wars Hotel, they've become more and more immersive. And I personally believe that, for a lot of guests, they really want to be able to escape into these worlds, because the world we live in has a lot of challenges associated with it. And to escape from those challenges sometimes is really important for the guests. So that's what they're looking for. Now, a lot of times when you go online for a digital experience into those worlds, they have the opportunity to interact with people far away, but what about their family? So, what we do, I think, probably more than a lot of the digital environments do, is we provide an immersive, interactive environment where you can share it with your whole family together all at one time. And a lot of the other areas that you can have virtual experiences and maybe smaller physical reality experiences, we don't get to share them quite as fully. And that sharing is still, I believe, an important part of our social fabric, whether it's sharing with our families or sharing with our friends. We want to go somewhere that's unique and someplace that we can immediately share with our friends and family, but then also to be able to extend that and put it up online and share our experiences with our friends outside of that sphere. And if you go into a virtual world, you can connect people from far away and you can share a common environment. And it's, a lot of people are having great fun with that. It's a way, I think, that, one of the things that I see, I've done a lot of international work. And lately, because of all the different factors that have been going on over the last couple of years throughout the world, I see what used to be globalization turning into localization in a physical sense. Now, I don't really see that happening so much in the digital realm at this point, because people are still connecting from other countries and players from all around the world will get together. And I think that's a great thing. The problem is, because of all of the physical issues, they can't necessarily come together in a singular physical location. So there's an interesting opportunity that exists there, I think, for the theme entertainment future, is how we start working on integrating that virtual experience that's online with a physical experience that's in a park, and being able to bring people together in both realms. And I know, when we talk about the metaverse, that's kind of the attempt at it, but the metaverse is really focusing a little bit more on the virtual than on the physical. And I think we, in the themed entertainment business, we've always been really good at presenting that physical space and being able to immerse the people and our guests in that physical space. So now one goal is to try to bring those two worlds together and create something that can extend that reality beyond those boundaries.
Well, the great thing about the technological advancements in theme parks and attractions specifically is really it feels like a lot of the first generation of that was, heck, just getting Wi-Fi in the parks, right? That was such a big challenge for such a long time. And then you talk about mobile ordering, virtual queues, things like that. And even, you look at a tool like the Disney's Magic Band Plus, where you're now able to collect bounties in real time, share it online. You're able to interact with your families and create those digital experiences. I tend to agree that sounds exactly like we're going. And even from park to park, right? The expectation is that there's got to be some sort of connectivity, not only on site but off site as well. So it's such an interesting world that we live in, because the guest is driving so much of that, and their desire for what we'll call constant connectivity and constant interaction really has morphed how we're creating these spaces. And Michael, I'll give you the last question here. Everybody always is asking what's next, right? What's next in themed lands, what's next for ride technology? But I'll just hand it to you this. What's next in the next 5 to 10 years that you think is going to be the next big thing in the attraction space specifically?
I really think the direction that we were just discussing, where we try to figure out how to bring together the metaverse and, let's call it, the physical verse. It's The Earthverse, that's a good one, yes. Because I think that there's always going to be, I don't want to say always, there is a strong possibility that what we have all experienced with COVID is not going to be the last time that something like that happens. Now, when something like that happens, being able to physically gather becomes a challenge. So then, as we saw during these last few years, the proliferation of online experiences and ways that we could interact with each other virtually throughout the world really mushroomed. It became much more than I think it ever has been. And it happened faster than I think anybody ever considered that it would. One of the interesting things that I could be misquoting this, but I believe it's pretty close, is that, when Facebook decided to change their name to Meta and kind of change the way that the company was working, what my understanding is that they actually had commissioned a report to try to look at their user base, which, is ginormous. It's billions of people, and find out how that user base is actually changing. And what they were discovering was that more and more, especially of the young people that were getting involved in a lot of the massive multiplayer games of different varieties, instead of using Facebook for their communications, they were going more and more into that fully immersive gaming environment, and they were staying in that environment. And Facebook was actually losing them to that environment. So Facebook changed to Meta to try to steer the ship in a different direction to be able to recapture those users before too many of them got away. Now, when you think about our guests going in and living inside of the metaverse and living inside of games and all of the experiences that they can have there, what comes to mind for me is there was a movie that was done many years ago that was based on a pretty famous book called Ready Player One. And Ready Player One really tried to demonstrate that you could take that virtual experience and combine a physical experience to make it an incredible experience. So right now, a lot of people have tried, and a lot of different companies have tried to develop different types of attachments and elements that would allow you to feel more like what you're doing inside of the metaverse in a physical way. Because we all need that. We still need the physical interaction. A hug is a great thing. If you can't feel somebody hugging you, there's something missing in the social interaction. It's part of human nature. So I think, we can offer the hug because we create physical realms and physical realities where guests can go and interact with a cosplay character from their favorite game that is doing physical interaction with them. But I think we can take it further as well, in that, if you're inside of a gaming experience and you're doing something crazy like flying, or you're inside the head of a giant robot running around, certainly visually, when you get the cues, you can trick your mind into feeling like that's what you're doing. But it's not until your body actually starts feeling the sensations that you are really physically fully immersed in that environment. And I think that's where the convergence of the metaverse and the physical come together. And that's going to create some really interesting opportunities going forward. And, we're going to be out on the technical bounds to try to accomplish that.
Well, Michael, I love to hear that, because the creative perspective and understanding where we're going as and attractions community really helps us as the actual technology manufacturers and integrator partners, helps us better serve the creative side and better serve at the end of the day the guests. So I love really the conversation we're having. I'm sure we'll find a way to get you back on the show because this is a topic that may deserve 3 or 4 different episodes. But Michael, Carroll, I appreciate you hopping on the show today and joining us.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure. Look forward to seeing you again.
And thank you for tuning in. Join us again next week.